On this Friday night, hate crimes in Canada. The alarming surge of threats and attacks against Jewish and Muslim communities.
Nobody in any community deserves to live in a state of fear.
The latest targets, including a school, and the response from politicians and police. A fragile peace shattered.
The house got burned completely with the people inside.
Global News gains access to the Israeli village closest to the Gaza border as the humanitarian crisis on the other side hits a new low. Canada's single-use plastic ban trashed. Why a federal court binned the environmental policy. Plus, from the prairies to Saturday Night Live, Calgarian pop star Tate McRae is taking the music world by storm.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The violence and tension in the Middle East is fueling a troubling trend here in Canada. In just the last 24 hours, both an Islamic community centre and a Jewish high school in the Toronto area were forced to evacuate after they both received threats. Those incidents are just the latest in a surge of hate crimes following the Hamas attack on October 7th and Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Eric Sorensen has our top story tonight.
Again, the same Toronto Jewish school threatened a month ago was evacuated today after a bomb threat. An email claimed multiple bombs had been placed in the building. There were none, but it's another public expression of hatred.
Nobody in any community deserves to live in a state of fear, deserves to live, go to school or attend a community center or a religious institution where there is fear.
The same words could have been said by the cab driver who was stopped in this Toronto intersection Wednesday, asked if he was Muslim, then sprayed with a substance in the face. These incidents are increasing. A mosque north of Toronto received threats this week. A synagogue and Jewish community center in Montreal were the targets of firebombs last week. Attacks on businesses like Indigo Books and Starbucks are increasing. They come against the backdrop of violence in Israel and Gaza. It's led to protests across this country for Israelis and for Palestinians, but has also unleashed anti-Semitic and Islamophobic hatred at levels seldom seen here.
Or gunshots fired at Jewish schools, or a terrifying rise in Islamophobia.
Try as he might to navigate a middle ground, there's no position from the Prime Minister that hasn't triggered a backlash. At a restaurant this week, he was accosted by angry protesters. Today, he lamented what's happening in a country built on diversity.
We find ourselves in a moment where the intensity of the emotions, of the fear, of the grief that people are going through is having Canadians forget a little bit about who we are.
Authors, one Jewish and one Palestinian, are troubled by the one-sidedness in the disputes. Writing recently, inflammatory statements are keeping us siloed in our tribes that can only lead to greater polarization and social disharmony.
Those who are asking us to take one side and not consider the other whatsoever are basically asking us to choose one humanity and ignore the other humanity.
The fracture in our discourse is harming both communities, and we need to do better.
At the Tannenbaum School in Toronto, the police had a simple plea, a simple message.
There is no place for hate in Toronto. There's no place for hate in Ontario.
A message, it seems, that many are not hearing right now. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The World Health Organization says it's extremely concerned about the spread of disease in Gaza. Conditions there are deteriorating rapidly with Israel's ongoing assault. Many Palestinians who followed Israel's evacuation order and fled northern Gaza now face strikes in the overcrowded south. The Israeli military pounded parts of southern Gaza with deadly shelling overnight, following through on threats earlier this week of an imminent military operation. The UN warns the expanded offensive could have catastrophic consequences, and a warning: the video you're about to see is disturbing. Redmond Shannon reports.
Unbearable grief. Hospital staff in Khan Yunis prepare more bodies for burial. Some are young children. Gaza's second largest city is in the southern half of the Palestinian territory, away from the main focus of Israel's ground operation in Gaza City.
We were in Gaza City, and because of the conflict, we moved to Khan Yunis. All my sisters died, and my son and daughter also. I wish I had taken her in my arms. My twin sister also died.
This week, Israeli Defense Forces dropped leaflets on eastern Khan Yunis, warning residents they also need to move to safety. Israel maintains Hamas targets are hiding in that area, but for some families, there was nowhere left to go. British-Palestinian doctor Ghassan Abu Sita has finally fled northern Gaza. He says they ran out of anaesthetics at Al-Ahli Hospital, where he has been working this month, making his job impossible.
It's been a living nightmare, leaving 500 wounded, knowing that there's nothing left for you to be able to do for them. It's just the most heartbreaking thing I've ever had to do.
The Palestinian Red Crescent says that hospital is now besieged with Israeli tanks close by. As Israel's raid on the nearby Al-Shifa hospital enters a third day.
Hamas is hidden inside.
The Israeli Defense Forces say Hamas militants were hiding out and holding hostages in and under that complex. As Gazans are forced to move around, they are crowding into smaller areas under ever-worsening conditions.
We are extremely concerned as well about the spread of diseases. The Ministry of Health, UNRWA and WHO, recorded already over 70,000 cases of acute respiratory infections, over 44,000 cases of diarrhea.
Israel's war cabinet said Friday, in a response to a request from Washington, it will allow 2 fuel trucks a day into Gaza to power water and sewage systems. That's 2 to 4% of the fuel Israel says Gaza used before October 7th. The country's national security advisor says Israel doesn't want the spread of disease to harm civilians or Israeli soldiers. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Mourners gathered in the West Bank city of Jenin today for the funerals of 3 Palestinians killed during an overnight Israeli raid. Hundreds joined that procession. The Israeli strikes also injured at least 15 others. Israel says the strike targeted Hamas, killing at least 5 of its members, while Hamas says 3 of its fighters died in that exchange. Funeral proceedings also took place in Israel today for an Israeli soldier who was taken hostage by Hamas. Israel's military says the body of 19-year-old Noah Marciano was recovered from Gaza earlier this week. Corporal Marciano was reportedly serving as a lookout in one of Israel's border communities with Gaza when Hamas began its attack on October the 7th. Well, today we got a closer look inside one of those communities. Nativ Hassara borders Gaza's northern perimeter just minutes from the once bustling Erez crossing. Israeli officials took journalists through a guided tour of that community, and our Mike Armstrong was there.
Weeks have passed. The war has not. Driving into Nativ Hassara, a massive plume of smoke rose in the distance from an explosion in Gaza. Right now, only a handful of residents is allowed back. The man leading the group is a photographer. Benny Vayner says he'd rather be carrying a camera. Now, it feels like a ghost town. There are no cars, and home after home sits empty. But there are also homes that are gone. Bilha and Yaakov Yonan were killed October 7th in the home where they raised their son.
The terrorists who came in, they shot an RPG into the house, and the house got burned completely with the people inside.
The attackers that hit Nativ Hassara came on paragliders. The man who shot this video in it is heard asking, "Where's the army?" Well, everyone, army included, was caught by surprise.
17 people in this community itself were killed here, another 2 right by the sea, which is right next to us, and another one that was killed coming in on a motorcycle. So altogether, 20 people from this community were killed, murdered.
That home behind me is the closest in this community to the Gaza Strip, basically 20 or 30 meters from the wall. This is a community that's so close that over the years, when the sirens go off to alert them that rockets are incoming, they've got 5 or 10 seconds to find shelter. Now, Nativ Hassara lives with the wall, but it also has a gate, one that's decorated with a mural called the Path to Peace. Well, right now, anger is making that path hard to see.
I'm not believe in this like this. I think it will be a lot of generations until will be peace.
The Israeli government has said towns that are close to Gaza may not be allowed to return. People are being put up in hotels for 3 months and then could be moved to new housing. That idea is not going over well.
When we run away, it's mean you lost. So there is no option to run away. I mean, we left home, but we are coming back.
Mike Armstrong, Global News, Nativ Hassara, Israel.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is heading home from San Francisco following the annual summit of Pacific nation leaders known as APEC. One leader in particular stole the spotlight. Chinese President Xi Jinping signaled that he wants to improve his country's relationship with the United States. But as our chief political correspondent David Aiken reports, China's relationship with Canada is another story.
At a summit a year ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping dressed down Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over a perceived slight. This year, things were slightly better. The two leaders didn't say a word to each other at a summit photo op, but later exchanged pleasantries as they passed each other in a hallway.
In addition to saying hello to President Xi, I talked about how we need to keep our officials and teams working together to try and create constructive dialogue around issues that matter to us individually, but also matter to the world.
By contrast, Xi met with U.S. President Joe Biden for 4 hours and then spoke publicly about improved relations with the United States. He even committed to sending pandas to a California zoo.
China believes in what it calls great power diplomacy, and it looks at Canada as either a middle or a small power, a place with which it does not have to curry favor.
As a result, here at APEC, Trudeau spent his time improving relationships with the likes of Japan, Mexico, and Australia.
It is a complex relationship with China, but Canada will continue to both stay strong, anchored in our values, and look for opportunities to contribute to economic growth and opportunities for Canadians.
Now, that said, just before this summit got going, the Chinese ambassador to Canada said that China was ready to have, quote, rational relations with Canada, though no details were given. And in the meantime, Canada is in the midst of a foreign interference inquiry, and China is right in the middle of that. Jeff?
David Aiken in San Francisco. Thanks, David. World leaders and dignitaries are also gathering in Halifax this weekend for an annual global security summit. Opening day focused largely on the war in Ukraine, but there's a growing push to change the agenda and put the Israel-Hamas war front and center. Heidi Petracek reports.
300 dignitaries and decision makers from around the world now in Halifax at a time of global conflict, one the president of the Halifax International Security Forum says began with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
It was the type of attack that belongs in a different century.
Paving the way, said National Defense Minister Bill Blair, for the deadly attacks by Hamas on Israel October 7th, as he reiterated Ottawa's support of Israel in staging its defense.
The price of justice cannot be the suffering of innocent civilians, and the protections of civilians remains paramount. But Hamas must stop using Palestinian civilians as human shields.
This is Minister Blair's first time at the Halifax International Security Forum, and he acknowledged that what he called recent challenges to rule-based international order won't be solved here. As many protests across the country continue to call for a ceasefire in the Middle East, demonstrators in Halifax gathering outside a restaurant where forum dignitaries went on Thursday night. 2 people were arrested, including Mona Manna, who says she just wanted to speak to her local MP, desperate to get her parents out of Gaza.
I had so much faith in the Canadian government that I can't say I have anymore. I really can't say that.
This protest outside the forum today, small, but with more planned this weekend. Outside a forum, organizers insist is an important show of strength in a battle for democracy Blair said the world can't afford to lose. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Single-use plastics persist. Coming up, why the federal government's plan to phase them out has been thrown out. Welcome back. Electric vehicle battery plant projects in Canada could cost a lot more than expected. The parliamentary budget officer says provincial and federal support for manufacturing in Canada will cost nearly $6 billion above original projections. That report analyzes the cost to governments in recent deals struck with Northvolt, Volkswagen, and Stellantis to locate their EV battery manufacturing facilities in Canada. Over the next 10 years, it pegs the total cost of support at more than $43 billion, rather than the $37 billion previously announced. The shortfall is attributed to lost corporate income tax revenues. A federal judge has dealt a big blow to the Liberal government's single-use plastic ban. Ottawa began phasing out some plastic products after adding them to a list of toxic items. Plastic producers and some prairie provinces called the move government overreach, and a federal court agreed. Taria Isri reports.
The once ubiquitous plastic bag. The grocery store staple has been harder and harder to come by ever since the federal government shelved them last year.
We didn't have enough time to prepare.
The owner of this Ottawa business made the move away from plastic, but says the alternatives are more expensive and sometimes less practical.
The only thing about the paper bags is if you're outside and it's raining, good luck. Your groceries have ended up all over the floor.
Ottawa says it's a price worth paying. The federal government labeled single-use plastic products as toxic because they're hard to recycle. It was a key step that allowed a national ban, sidestepping provincial authority on waste management.
So the classification of plastics as toxic material was not only significant overreach on the part of government, but it wasn't necessarily informed by science or evidence.
Plastic producers fought the ban in court, with Saskatchewan and Alberta joining the challenge, arguing it put jobs and investment at risk. A federal judge sided with them, calling Ottawa's actions unconstitutional and unreasonable.
It really hampers the government's ability to curb plastic pollution, which, as we know, is one of the biggest environmental crises of our time.
There's a patchwork of similar bans across the country. Despite the ruling, the big grocery chains don't plan on bringing back plastic bags. And neither do these shoppers.
It does seem like a step backwards. It seems like we're kind of being slow to react.
I think we've adapted and we moved in the right direction. And I'd like to see that continue, because there's so much waste with these bags.
The battle over the single-use plastic ban is likely not over. The Environment Minister says the federal government is strongly considering an appeal. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
The leathers were swinging, all the drums they were singing.
Still ahead, why this unlikely Christmas duet is striking a chord. The Las Vegas Formula One Grand Prix got off to a chaotic start last night. Qualifying rounds for the inaugural race were delayed after a Ferrari was badly damaged from running over a loose manhole cover. Action didn't resume until 2:30 in the morning in front of a mostly empty grandstand.
You were handsome, you were pretty, you're the king of South Philly when the band finished playing.
Move over, Taylor Swift. The Kelce brothers have sung their way to the top of the charts on iTunes. Travis, the NFL star who is dating Taylor Swift, in case you hadn't heard, joined his brother Jason, who's a Philadelphia Eagles player, for a sibling duet. It's part of an album that's on sale next month called A Philly Special Christmas. Proceeds go towards children's charities in Philadelphia.
From the studio here at the Alberta Ballet to 30 Rock and Saturday Night Live. The rise of Calgary's Tate McRae coming up on Global National.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada features a four-legged employee at downtown Edmonton's oldest hotel.
Treats!
Hendricks is the new canine ambassador at the Fairmont Hotel Macdonald. He was too social for his career as a guide dog, so I'm sure he'll fit right in at the hotel. $5 from each guest pet fee will go towards Canadian Guide Dogs for the Blind. Thanks for watching.